Sup VC, Bobby B here. Welcome to another video. Doing something a little bit different today. Today I thought that I would do a personal ranking of the Genesis discography. Now I realize that this is a video that isn't going to appeal to everyone who follows my channel, especially those who follow and comment on my channel these days. And two, this is an idea that's been done a billion times before, but I noticed that a few Genesis ranking videos have resurfaced again recently, and one that I took note of that I particularly enjoyed was done by Shannon D, who's been a member of the vinyl community off and on for many years now. Always puts a lot of thought into her videos, and she knows a lot, but she's still learning too, and it's really interesting to listen to her thoughts on her favorite artists. She puts a lot of depth. There's a lot of depth behind her videos, and not a lot of bells and whistles and fancy things too, which is great. Which is actually what I prefer. I'm going to be doing a little bit of fancy stuff in this video just because I don't own everything on vinyl and I don't feel like digging it out and holding it up. So I'm going to do something kind of, you'll notice I've got some whatever floating album graphic thing happening here. That's cool. But anyways, I thought I would discuss this because Genesis, although they're not a band I listen to a ton these days, I do credit Genesis. There was a time that they were my favorite band, and I do credit them for being a big part of the reason that I am so into music now and that I'm always looking for something new and exciting to listen to. Because Genesis, especially an earlier period, certain periods of Genesis, really opened my eyes to music beyond the mainstream. And I'll be discussing that throughout the course of this video as well. Genesis and their relation to my love of music, but I figured a ranking video is a good way to do that, and especially the way the albums are ranked, because it also helps me to go through the story, go through my Genesis experience in a progressive way, and you'll see what I mean as we go throughout this video. Now, Shannon D was, with her video, she limited it to the years between 1970 and 1980, which actually makes a lot of sense. In fact, as we go through my countdown, you'll notice that everything in that time period is in the higher end of my countdown, and everything else is in the lower end of my countdown. So it makes sense to do that, but I'm going to include all of their albums because I do have some fairly strong opinions on some of those, and I also, it helps me tell my Genesis story a little bit too, to reference some of these albums, because, well, you'll see why. But let me start with my ranking, and starting at number 15 on my list. And another thing, I'm just sticking with the studio albums, and the reason why is I would like to include Genesis Live and Seconds Out, maybe even Three Sides Live, but the thing is, towards the end of their career, they were including so many kind of what I would say pointless live albums that it's too much to include those two, so I'm not going to include those. But Genesis Live and Seconds Out in particular are must-gets if you're interested in exploring the world of Genesis. Okay, so here we go, top 15. Number 15 on my list is unfortunately their latest album, 1997's Calling All Stations. Now, I desperately was hoping that this album could be a little bit higher on the list. I remember when it first came out, I was actually really excited about it because by that point in Genesis' career, I was pretty tired of the Phil Collins years. I was pretty tired of Phil Collins in general. And so I thought, I was actually really excited at the prospect of Genesis continuing on with a new lead singer. And Ray Wilson, I thought, was an excellent choice. I really like Ray Wilson's voice, and especially if you ever come across any recordings from their tour that they did to promote the Calling All Stations album, Ray Wilson really breathed some fresh life into some of those songs, in my opinion. Ray Wilson's version of Mama, I think, is better than Phil's. I know that's kind of sacrilegious for some to say, but I really do believe that. I think Ray Wilson's voice sounded wonderful on some of the old Peter Gabriel songs. Even even a song like kind of a what I would call a mediocre Genesis song like No Son of Mine, Ray Wilson's voice sounded great in that. So I like Ray Wilson. Unfortunately, it's the songs on this album are not very memorable. I remember I had a lot of attitude when this album came out, and I remember telling everybody that was slamming Calling All Stations. I remember saying, no, it's their best album since Duke. But I think I was just kind of responding to people blaming Ray Wilson for how bad that album is, because as much as it pains me to say it, I think Tony and Mike are to blame for the mediocrity of that album. In a way, I think it would have been cool if they just gave it one more try. And because, Calling All Stations could be seen as sort of an album that they were kind of, working on, kind of still seeing how they fit together. I think a follow-up with a definite agenda would have been, I think there's potential there. But anyways, they didn't. And Calling All Stations is my number 15. There are some really good songs on there. The Dividing Line, if I were to do a list of my favorite Genesis songs, say from 1982 onwards, The Dividing Line would be in that top 10. That's a great song. I liked the title track pretty good. It sounds kind of unique and like nothing else they've ever done before. And even One Man's Fool I thought was a pretty good way to close the album. I don't know. Nobody else likes that song, but I thought it was pretty good. That's my number 15. Number 14 and 13 are kind of tied, but I was kind of deciding which one should be a little bit higher than the other. I decided to put Invisible Touch. 1986's Invisible Touch at number 14. And this was my introduction to Genesis. But I was just a kid. I was like 12 or 13 years old when this album came out, and I loved music, but all I knew of music was, white boy top 40 music. So what was that? What was big in the 80s? Billy Joel, Hall & Oates, Huey Lewis and the News, Madonna. That's what I was listening to. And, of course, Phil Collins. And that's what I liked. So I bought Invisible Touch because I liked those Phil Collins songs at the time. But what's interesting is I was at about 12 or 13 years old. So I was at that age where my tastes were starting to be molded. And there was one song on the Invisible Touch album that really stood out to me at that time. It was a 10-minute progressive rock song entitled Domino. And I remember being blown away by that song, thinking, how come music like this has never been invented and has never been done before? And I would play Domino over and over and over again. I just loved that song. Well, that was a sign of greater things to come. We'll revisit that story in a moment. But Invisible Touch is my number 14. Nothing like Domino, I think, is a really good song. The Brazilian is a good instrumental. Other than that, I like Tonight, 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 the middle instrumental portion of that. Land of Confusion's a good pop song. Throwing It All Away is a decent ballad, but yeah, adult contemporary, not really my cup of meat. That's number 14. Number 13 is We Cant Dance, which I think is kind of on par with Invisible Touch. Where We Cant Dance suffers is all of the filler on that album. There's songs I don't even really remember. Tell Me Why, Way of the World. I don't know any of those songs. But the strong cuts on that album are better than anything on Invisible Touch. So, Dreaming While You Sleep is a really good song. That's one that if it didn't have the cheesy 80s production, that's the problem with Invisible Touch too, that goes without saying. But even on this album, there's a lot of cheesy 80s production, and the problem is it came out in 1992, so they should have been past that. But if it didn't have that kind of cheesy drum sound, Dreaming While You Sleep would be a great post-rock song, a great post-rock number that I'd appreciate even more. But it's a good song. Driving the Last Spike is an epic 10-minute cut on the album, and I don't like long Genesis songs just because they're long, but it does give them the opportunity to breathe a bit, and I really think Driving the Last Spike is an exciting piece of music. And then the closing song on the album, Fading Lights, is also a great way to end the album. Would have been a great way to even end their career, you know, lyrically talking about getting older. But it's the long instrumental piece in the middle. Kind of neat guitar work from Mike Rutherford, which he doesn't, you know, he ain't no Steve Hackett. He ain't even really a Daryl Sturmer. But there's some neat guitar work in that, but it's the keyboards. Again, Tony Banks on keyboards. It doesn't really get better than that. So those, based on the strength of those few songs, I kind of put it just a little bit ahead of Invisible Touch, but only slightly. And number 12 is their self-titled album, Genesis. Again, there's a couple of strong cuts on there. Cheesy 80s production again, but in second, Home by the Sea. It actually works for it. I like that drum sound, the drum sound in that song. Kind of almost a bit of a krautrock feel in a way. So that's kind of neat. The song Silver Rainbow, kind of a hidden cut on the album, but that would rank amongst the top 5 or top 10 Genesis songs from 1982 onwards. So yeah, so that's 12th place, the Genesis self-titled album. From here on in, the top 11 are all albums that I think are pretty cool in one way or another. Now you're probably sitting there thinking, wait a sec, you didn't mention Abacab yet. How could that be? Well, let's talk about Abacab. Abacab's my number 11. I've seen people, I know many people think that this is the worst album Genesis ever recorded, and I sort of understand that because it is their weirdest album, I think. Which is interesting because it was at a point where they were starting to get more commercial. There are a couple of commercial songs on there. No Reply at All, which, not my favorite Genesis song. Man on the Corner's okay. But even some of the singles on that album, Keep It Dark is such a bizarre song. But really kind of cool and interesting. Even some of their attempts at prog on that album are really weird. The keyboard part in Lurker, you know, Who Done It, which people really hate. I don't hate it. I know that's weird, but it's I don't know, like it's got this kind of bizarre, I mean, it's really weird, but I love this album because it's so weird. It's just all over the place. I kind of admire that. I don't know, there's a part of me that kind of admires that. Me and Sarah Jane, I think, is a great song. The album ends with kind of a lost Genesis song called Another Record, which, I don't care who you are, that to me sounds like a Peter Gabriel song, like a Peter Gabriel solo song from, you know, kind of around the time of the Melt album, the third Peter Gabriel album. Give that a listen and imagine Peter Gabriel singing it. But yeah, Abacab's a weird album, so it's easily their most polarizing album. I can see that you might not like it, but I think, you know what, I kind of embrace its weirdness. That brings us to the top 10, and at number 10 is their debut album, From Genesis to Revelation. Now, a lot of people would put this at the bottom of the list as well, and I can see why. Doesn't sound like anything else they've done. They were still pretty young and inexperienced at the time, but what I do like about From Genesis to Revelation is I think it's a solid 60s psych pop album. You know, they were trying to sound like the Bee Gees at that time, and I love the Bee Gees at that time. They sound a little bit like the Zombies. I love the Zombies. I mean, there's some really good, I think there's some really good songs on there. It's just weird to call it a Genesis album. So I get that. But yeah, for what it is, I actually really enjoy it. I like it more than I ever have, to be honest. It's interesting. I recently heard Noel Gallagher from Oasis, who's always been very vocal about his hatred of Phil Collins and Genesis, and even Peter Gabriel, although he acknowledges that Sledgehammer's a great song. But he says that he stumbled across from Genesis to Revelation and the song "The Conqueror." He was blown away. And then he played it for Johnny Marr, and Johnny Marr was blown away. And the two of them were like, "Why didn't Genesis just keep doing great music like this?" So everything is subjective. Noel Gallagher actually went on to say, "Oh, and that song, "The Silent Sun," they better not be listening too carefully, because I'm going to rip off that song someday." So hey, so it has its supporters. There you go. Generally, it's people that don't like Genesis, though. So, what can we say about that? That's my number 10. At number 9 is 1978's And Then There Were Three, the first album after Steve Hackett left the band. Again, if you saw Shannon D's video, I don't have much more to add than what she said, because I pretty much agree with her all across the board on that album. Musically, it's a great album. The songs on that album are excellent. In fact, I don't think there's a bad song on that album. I like all of them, all 12 songs. Even Follow You, Follow Me, I think is just one of the great ballads. And I don't think it's sappy myself. I think it's just a really good tune. A Burning Rope is my favorite song on the album. Snowblind, especially the chorus. Snowbound, sorry. Snowbound, I think. I think it's called Snowbound. Should double check on that. But, I mean, like, that song to me, that's practically a shoegaze song. In the chorus, it's got a real kind of My Bloody Valentine feel to it, and I really appreciate it for that. I think where the album lacks is that Genesis albums, by and large, work very well together as an album, and then there were three sounds more like a collection of songs. So that's but as far as the songs go, I think they're excellent songs. Down and Out might be, I would say it's probably my fourth favorite opener for a Genesis album. Yeah, sure, why not? Go with that. My fourth favorite opener. Down and Out's great. I had my friend who's a drummer. His goal was to master the drums on that song, and he says it's really hard. He really struggled to do it. We're going back like 25 years now, and I haven't seen him since then. We're tight. We're like this. But I wonder if he ever mastered it. But that's a great song, Down and Out. Oh, Deep in the Motherlode. That's a wonderful song, too. Anyways, that's my number 9. At number 8 is 1979, 1980's Duke. And this is where my personal... another chapter in my personal Genesis story. Duke was the next album that I bought by Genesis, and I was still listening to your White Boy Top 40 stuff. But I think it was probably at Sears or the Bay or something like that. They had all these cassettes for, $2 or $3, maybe $5 or something. And I saw Duke, and I recognized the songs Misunderstanding and Turn It On Again. Turn It On Again I thought was a great song, so I bought the tape based on that. Well, when I pressed play and heard the opening notes of Behind the Lines, my mind was blown. And I wore that tape out, and listening to primarily the first 3 songs, Behind the Lines, Duchess, and Guide Vocal, and then Turn It On Again, and then the conclusion, Duke's Travels, Duke's End. I was so green, I had never even heard of an album kind of working together in that way, where it ended the same way it started. This was like a revelation to me, which is weird because I was familiar with the Beatles from my dad. I mean, Sgt. Pepper's, but for whatever reason, I never made that connection. So Duke blew my mind. Around that time, I started working with a friend of mine who was a little older than me. His name was Ed. His name is Ed. It's still Ed. He hasn't changed his name. I haven't spoken to him for a couple of years, but to my knowledge, his name is still Ed. And anyways, he was telling me what his favorite, we were talking music, he was saying what his favorite bands are, and he said, well, my favorite band is Genesis. And I told him, yeah, well, I've got Invisible Touch, I've got Duke, and he goes, well, I prefer when, he says kind of earlier stuff. And I said, well, I said, like, how long have they been around? Like, I was under the impression maybe Duke was one of their first albums. And he said, oh, they've been around for a while. He said, but he says, I don't know. Like, I mean, their music isn't for everybody. And I told him what I loved about Duke and Invisible Touch. And his eyebrow perked up, and he was like, well, here, take a listen to this and tell me what you think. I'll get back to that story in a moment. Let's carry on with the countdown. Number 7 is their second album, Trespass from 1970. Such a huge shift. Steve and Phil are not in the band yet, but this album, it's kind of acoustic based, kind of folkier than what would come up afterwards, but that progressive style, well, it was very progressive already. And Looking for Someone, the way that album starts is wonderful, but it does have some of their strongest cuts. The Knife is a song that has gone on to be a classic from the classic Genesis lineup, from the classic Genesis years. And The Knife, it's got to be the heaviest. I think it's the heaviest song they've ever done. The guitar work in the middle there is insane. So that song is awesome. I agree again with Shannon when she said that the version on Genesis Live is better. It is, and I love. I've gone to see the Musical Box in concert a number of times. They're a band from Montreal that basically emulates the golden years of Genesis. And the first time I went to see them, it was basically just kind of as a lark. I was kind of like, I don't know about a cover band, but they're far more than a cover band. Like, they're really worth seeing if you ever get the chance. Take a chance on seeing them. If you're kind of on the fence and you're kind of like, I don't know if I need to see that, and you're a Genesis fan, see it. I think you'll be very surprised. And if you're not, if you end up not liking it, email me and I'll give you your money back. I'm not going to give you your money back, but I do think you'll like it. Anyways, where was I going with that? Oh yeah, when I see them, you can count on someone whenever they're up there on stage and there's a moment of silence. You can count on somebody in the audience going, "The knife, the knife," and either the lead singer of the Musical Box will walk up and he'll to the microphone and he'll either go, "Wrong," or he'll go, "The knife," and they'll start playing it. Number 7, Trespass. Oh, The Knife is great. Not the best song on the album. Stagnation is the best song on the album and one of my top 10 favorite Genesis songs of all. Stagnation is a perfect song. It was their first perfect song. Brilliant. Absolutely beautiful. Number 6. Now, the top 6, we're getting into an area where, they could all be number 1. But anyways, at number 6, I went with Nursery Crime. Nursery Crime, the Musical Box. This is the first album with Phil and Steve on it. It's got the Musical Box, classic. It's got the Fountain of Salmacis, classic. It's got the Return of the Giant Hogweed, classic. But I've even some of the songs like Harlequin, which I thought were kind of throwaways at one point, I've grown to love. Harold the Barrel is the most British sounding thing I've ever heard, and I just love it. It's a great album. So Nursery Crime is at number 6. Number 5, I put A Trick of the Tail, which is the first album with Phil Collins taking over the lead. Yeah, that's a great way to start an album. Man, that ding, 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 doo, doo, boo, 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 boo. The production-wise, they've never sounded better. The production on that album is great. The songs are perfect. Again, I don't think there's a bad song on that album. Again, you got a couple of sort of, Entangled is, again, sort of a precursor to, I don't know, like shoegaze or post-rock or something. It's Madman Moon. The piano, I love the piano on that song, especially in the middle section. I think Phil's voice is beautiful. Robbery, Assault, and Battery is just fun to sing along to, and it's got a great instrumental portion. Ripples, one of the best songs, if not the best song on the album. Yeah, Ripples is probably... Well, Los Endos is pretty darn good too, so... and that's another album that works so great as a whole. The album ends the way it starts. I love that. So that's my number 5. Number 4 is Wind and Wuthering, and I think a lot of people would have it the other way around. I think most people prefer Trick of the Tail. Wind and Wuthering is a sadly overlooked album, but it's got Steve Hackett's stamp all over it. Steve Hackett, I feel like he probably did more on Wind and Wuthering than on anything else. And the shift from Wind and Wuthering to And Then There Were Three is, I find it's even more significant than the shift from The Lamb to Trick of the Tail. I think losing Steve Hackett was a greater blow to the band than losing Peter Gabriel, in my opinion. But Wind and Wuthering is great. Another solid opener. One for the Vine is one of my all-time favorite Genesis songs. It's like a mini movie, as a lot of their songs are, but I think that's such an adventurous song. And side 2, All in a Mouse's Night is fun, but after that, Blood on the Rooftops, Unquiet Slumbers for the Sleepers, In That Quiet Earth, and Afterglow, I love that chunk of music. Like, if I could count that whole chunk of music as one song, might be my favorite Genesis song. I just love that whole piece together. I don't think you should ever separate it. I know they've done Afterglow on many in concert and many live shows, and it's great, but I think it should always follow Blood on the Rooftops, Unquiet Slumbers for the Sleepers, and In That Quiet Earth. I think those 4 songs belong together. Wind and Wuthering is awesome. Number 3, my third favorite album by Genesis is 1972's Foxtrot. Getting back to my friend Ed, he said, wow, you like that stuff. Okay, I don't know what you'll think of this, but give a listen to this song. And what's interesting, he didn't play me Supper's Ready, didn't play me Watcher of the Skies, didn't play Get 'Em Out by Friday. He played me Can, Utility, and the Coastliners. And my mind was blown. When that song was done, I remember we were sitting in his station wagon. His radio wasn't working, so he actually had a ghetto blaster, a big red ghetto blaster in his car. That's what we listened to. Pressed play and played Can, Utility, and the Coastliners. And I fell in love instantly. When that song was done, I said, that is the greatest song I've ever heard. I said, what? How old is it? He said, 1972. I was like, how was I not aware that music like this existed? And he lent me his entire Genesis collection on tape. And I remember just making mixtapes of, I kind of made like a 7-volume set. I might as well have just recorded the entire albums, but for whatever reason, I made kind of like a 7-tape set of my favorite Genesis songs. And that was based on just a few listens. Like, it took me a week to make these compilations. And yeah, I fell in love with Genesis, and they became my favorite band and remained my favorite band for many, many years. So Foxtrot is where that introduction, that's where I really kind of fell hardcore in love with Genesis. And that led on to so many other tastes in music from then on, to the point where even to this day, if you ever kind of see my count, you know, when I post my countdowns for my favorite albums of the year and things like that, I never stop exploring. I'm always looking for something I've never heard before, and I can credit Genesis with that. So Foxtrot is my number 3 album, but it's not just for nostalgic reasons. It's a great album. Supper's Ready, I used to listen to on repeat. A 25-minute song I would listen to on repeat. Yeah, Watcher of the Sky, just amazing. That's my number 3. If you saw my list of my top 100 albums of all time, then you already know what my number 1 is, but you might be surprised that Foxtrot is number 3, because there were only 2 Genesis albums on that list, and they were Foxtrot and my number 1 album. But I've changed my mind, as you do. I changed my mind a lot, and kind of jumping ahead of Foxtrot is The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway at number 2, an album I've always loved. Used to be my favorite, in fact, I think, back in those days. But I've received a bit of exposure to it once again more recently. First of all, There's a friend of mine, a young guy, like he's got to be 20 years old, 21 maybe, who all of a sudden fell for Genesis. I don't know where that came from. I didn't introduce it to him, but he had heard how much I liked them or how much I knew about them, and he told me, hey, I listened to this today. I listened to this album. I listened to this, and telling me he says, I'm on a real Genesis binge right now, and his enthusiasm for The Lamb got me listening to it again. And so I was listening to The Lamb the other day, and then I came across Shannon's video a couple days later where she directed her viewers to this animated kind of art piece on YouTube that accompanies the entire album. It's amazing. If you haven't seen it, you've got to see it. I put it on and I was just going to sample it, and I ended up watching the whole thing. So well done. The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is just such a great album, and I love every bit of it. I'm not on board with the people who say that the album would have been better if it was condensed, or if it was a single album, or record 1 is better than record 2. Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think the whole thing is wonderful. I love the way the album ends. I love the waiting room jam on record 2. I think the songs like Anyway and The Lamia are so underrated. I've even grown to like, Brian Eno's kind of ambient piece, Silent Sorrow and Empty Boats, on record 2. And then of course all the classics. Record 1 is jam-packed with Genesis classics. The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, what a wonderful album. It's my number 2. And that means you all know what my number 1 is. It's a lot of people's number 1, but not everybody's. Selling England by the Pound. And I articulated why I love it so much in my top 100 albums of all time video, but basically it's got everything I'd ever want. Everything I love about music is found on that one album. From the way it opens with Peter Gabriel's voice unaccompanied, leading into a very pastoral progressive rock song, followed by their attempt at a pop song, I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe, with a hooky chorus, just super catchy song. Firth of Fifth contains piano and classical moments that are as good as any classical piece that I have ever heard. Steve Hackett's beautiful soaring guitar work. I've heard it said that a great guitar solo is a guitar solo that you can sing. I sing along to the Firth of Fifth guitar solo all the time. It is just a work of art without all of the flash and nonsense that so many other guitar virtuosos bring to the table. Steve Hackett's beautiful soaring guitar is beautiful and soaring. I'm going to use that adjective as much as possible to describe that. It soars beautifully. Followed up by More Fool Me, which some say is the throwaway on the album, but it's not. It's a beautiful ballad with Phil Collins' vocals, and you know what? We know that when you hear Phil Collins' ballad, it usually means overproduced and sappy, but this is not overproduced, nor is it sappy. It's a whimsical, it's not whimsical. It's, I don't know how to describe it. It's just a beautiful acoustic ballad. Phil sings on it. Peter's harmonies with Phil are great. The Battle of Epping Forest, yeah, it's a weird one. Yeah, it takes a few listens to get into it. The first time I heard it, I thought it was the worst song ever. Now I love it. And the beautiful thing is I was introduced to that song in my mid-teens, early to mid-teens, when my memory was still, I memorized everything back then. So to this day, I still know all the lyrics to that song. And when you know all the ridiculous lyrics to that song, it is the funnest song to sing along to ever. It is just so much fun, and Peter puts on the voices, and you know what, it's like that song, it's like the Beatles meets Pink Floyd meets Monty Python all kind of thrown together in one crazy tune, and I just love it. After the Ordeal is a wonderful instrumental. Tony Banks says it's the worst song they ever did. I completely disagree. I think it's an instrumental piece that is so wonderful, it's almost hypnotizing. And then the conclusion of the album, Cinema Show, Isle of Plenty, just one of the greatest jams in Genesis music history. I think that's my favorite Genesis song, Cinema Show, Isle of Plenty. I just love that instrumental portion in the middle. It's just one of the most exciting things I've ever heard. And then the way the album ends with, I believe it's Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins singing a grocery list in the round, and it's just a perfect, to the same tune as Dancing with the Moonlit Night, brings the album together perfectly. There aren't very many complete packages as complete as the album Selling by the Pound, which is my #1 Genesis album. So there you go. That's my relationship with Genesis. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this video goes up. We'll see. That's my plan. And I'm going to leave it there. So thank you for watching. We'll get back to another regular episode of Spins and Finds and whatever. I've got it recorded already, and I'll post it in the next few days. Thanks for watching, friends, and I wish you all the best. Enjoy the rest of your day.